Welcome to part three of the presentation on voyage planning in a changing world. At the end of part two, we have reached the Pacific via the Panama Canal, and having passed through or under the Americas Bridge, we have the entire Pacific in front of us. This gives you a very good idea of the islands that are spread out across the South Pacific. And in this part three, I would like to take you on a hypothetical voyage all the way from Panama to the Torres Straits. So, having reached the South Pacific through the Panama Canal, we have various options for the continuation of the voyage towards French Polynesia. The very top line shows a direct route to the Marquesas, and normally those who decide to take this route stay north of the equator, and generally speaking, they have usually the best winds all the way to the Marquesas Islands, provided they cross the equator west of 130 degrees west. But otherwise, this top line shows the quickest route to the Marquesas. A more interesting route would be to go from Panama to the Galapagos Islands, where it is possible to stop, but only with a special permit from the Ecuadorian authorities, and then continue from there to the Marquesas. And finally, another interesting option, the most challenging one, is to sail either directly from Panama or from the Galapagos Islands to Easter Island, and then continue west from there to Pitcairn and the Gambia Islands, and reach the French Polynesia that way. Now, normally boats plan to arrive in the Pacific by late March or perhaps in April. And although you can see here on this page for the North Pacific Ocean, the month of April, although there are indeed cyclones in the western part of the South Pacific, the eastern part of the South Pacific is not affected by tropical storms in April. And for that reason, any voyages and passages during this time should be safe. The windgram that I show you now from Panama to the Marquesas is the one on the direct route. And as you can see, there are very consistent winds from the east, southeast, and the force is force 4 to force 5. If you decide to go to the Galapagos Islands and then continue from there, you have mixed wind conditions, but still the best winds from the east or southeast going to Galapagos Islands. And then once you have reached that latitude, you will pick up the predominant southeasterly trade winds. And finally, for those who are attracted by the more challenging option to sail to Easter Island and then to Pitcairn and from there to the Gambia Islands, you can see here that indeed the wind conditions are generally very good. So all these three windgrams show, generally speaking, favorable winds for that route going through Easter Island and then reaching French Polynesia via the Gambia Islands. Having reached the Gambia Islands, unless one continues directly to Tahiti, no one would actually want to miss the Marquesas. So again, you have very good winds, beam winds from the Gambia Islands to the Marquesas. Now, we don't want to neglect arrivals from the North Pacific, and both starting from the US West Coast, whether from San Francisco or San Diego, will have, as you can see, very good winds. Indeed, if you look at the windgram from San Francisco to the Marquesas, the winds are indeed fairly strong, force 5 or 6 or 7 even on the Beaufort scale. But in any case, whether starting from San Francisco or from San Diego, you have very good winds all the way across the equator to the Marquesas. And then you have this spectacular landfall of the island of Voyaging, and you have arrived in French Polynesia, and your South Pacific cruise can start in truth. So having spent some time in the Marquesas Islands, the winds to Tahiti from there are again very good, consistent winds, and they're all from the east. So now you have the opportunity sailing to Tahiti from the Marquesas either on a direct route or to stop in the Tuamotus. French Polynesia is made up of 5 island groups. If you've been to the Gambia Islands, that would have been the first one, the Marquesas, the second, the Tuamotu Islands, the third, and the Society Islands, the fourth. And all these could be visited on this route. Most boats do not reach the Austral Islands, which are south of French Polynesia, but otherwise, from Tahiti, most of the boats would start sailing west towards the Cook Islands. Having arrived in Tahiti, Papeete has now a very good marina right in the center of town, as you can see here. And from there, we continue the voyage west towards the Cook Islands. And I wrote in this map this time to show that indeed from French Polynesia, you have a lot of choices sailing west. You can go to the northern Cook Islands or straight to the southern Cook Islands. From there, continue to Tonga, Fiji, and then we'll discuss the options from Fiji when we get to that point. From Tahiti to the Cook Islands, again, I'm very pleased to say that you can see that the winds are very consistent, is strong, but from the right direction. And a must on this voyage west, on this passage west, is to stop at Suvarov Island, an uninhabited island that belongs to the Cook Islands. And once can stop there, there is normally during the sailing season, the cruising season, a warden, but all the boats are allowed to stop there for a limited period before continuing west towards Tonga. Again, the winds are, as you see in this window, very good. And having reached Tonga, the northern archipelago of Vavau, one of the most attractive and popular cruising destinations in the South Pacific. There are something like 100 small islands spread out around this area, all very well protected from the ocean. And it's a fantastic cruising area. And actually, it was the base for the very first charter operation in the South Pacific. From Tonga westwards, the voyage continues to Fiji. And the nearest port of entry is Savu Savu. It's a very good marina, a very small marina, but it's very well protected. Actually, it's one of the few hurricane holes in Fiji. So this is Savu Savu, where you can clear into Fiji and continue west. By that time, having started from Panama in April or May, and having cruised through the Cook Islands and possibly Niue and Tonga, maybe made a detour to Samoa, the time is advanced. And by October, the boats start getting together in some port in Fiji, like this one is on the west coast of Fiji, preparing for the passage to New Zealand. I want to point out here that normally, and I'm going to speak about that route in part 4, normally the boats on a westbound cruise across the South Pacific plan to spend the coming critical season, the coming cyclone season, out of the tropics, and the majority of the boats, maybe 90%, will sail south to New Zealand. And this is a map to give you an idea of the various routes to New Zealand. You either sail to New Zealand from Tonga or from Suva, or if having reached further than that, and even to New Caledonia, perhaps from there. But basically, as I said earlier, the majority of the boats will decide to spend the cyclone season out of the tropics, and New Zealand is the favorite destination. Sails from Fiji, from the capital Suva, to Opua in the Bay of Islands in New Zealand are very good. Basically, you can see from the arrow shows actually the destination, and the winds are again on the beam, fairly strong, but consistent. I put in this chart for the month of November because in the past, boats leaving the tropics were leaving Fiji or Tonga early November, and that is now no longer recommended because now the cyclone season starts early in November, so the tropics should be left in October. This is the chart the pilot chart for October, as you can see, there are no cyclones in the whole area, all the way from Panama to Australia. Landfall in New Zealand, making it the Bay of Islands, is a very spectacular area. And then boats will continue from there, possibly to Auckland, because it's not only a very attractive town in itself, but it's got very good marinas and also very good services, repair and maintenance services. So it's a very good time to spend the southern summer from, let's say, end of October, November, until the following May or June. And then you continue or resume your Pacific voyage. Going back to that map from before, on leaving New Zealand, you can sail back to Tonga, to maybe to Fiji, or possibly even to New Caledonia. And one point again, going back to the pilot charts, is that whereas in the past boats would leave New Zealand as early as April, but certainly in May, now all has changed because the cyclone season in the South Pacific lasts longer. There are no cyclones in May. In fact, there was one this year that affected New Zealand. So May now is a time when it's better to stay in New Zealand and wait until June, when, as you can see from this pilot chart, the conditions are right and there are no more cyclones to be concerned about. Sailing back into the tropics from New Zealand, from Opua to Tonga, the winds are okay, as you can see here. And similarly, sailing direct to Suva being a bit further west, or the Fiji further west, the winds are even better. Also, there is a possibility for those who have already spent enough time in Tonga and Fiji on leaving New Zealand to sail directly to Noumea in New Caledonia. And Noumea has a very good port. Actually, it is regarded as and considered a hurricane or cyclone haven. It is indeed very well protected, but it's still in the tropics. So this is a decision to be made whether you decide to spend the cyclone season there or stay longer in New Zealand or possibly in Australia. Because the other option from New Zealand would be to sail west from Opua, from New Zealand to Sydney, to make this spectacular landfall in this amazing place. And then continue, spend some more time in Australia, maybe return to the tropics, and maybe directly sail to Noumea from New Caledonia from Sydney. There's too much, and there are too many opportunities and options for sailing and cruising and seeing more of Southeast Australia. But in any case, we return now to the tropics to continue our hypothetical round-the-world voyage. And then from Noumea, we will head north into Vanuatu, or those who have sailed first to Tonga or Fiji continue west to Port Vila, the capital of Vanuatu. And I put this map in here to give you an idea of the spread of islands. In Vanuatu is an amazing and excellent cruising ground. People still, in most islands, live a traditional way of life, and it is certainly well worth allowing some time to cruise these really attractive islands. From, again, on our route around the world, from Port Vila or for anywhere in Vanuatu, we'll head west to Mackay in one of the ports of entry in Australia, and from there to Torres Straits, because this route, as the recommended route, stays inside the barrier reef. As you can see here, crossing, going west from Vanuatu, the whole area or the whole passage can be made under the protection of the Great Barrier Reef, which is quite fantastic. And that leads to Thursday Island in the Torres Straits. And from there, we have to stop here because I decided this is a good stop to stop the part 3 of this presentation. But in the next presentation, we'll continue from the Torres Straits. We'll continue to either from Europe, from there to Europe via the North Indian Ocean, which is one route which is not so often sailed nowadays because of mostly the political uncertainty in the Red Sea, or the classic route will continue via the Cape of Good Hope to the South Atlantic and beyond. But that is something for next time. So I look forward to welcoming you to part 4 and final part of this presentation sometime in the next few days after this presentation number 3, has been uploaded on the YouTube site. Goodbye.